The new Subaru Impreza was improved where it needed to be, just like its Colorado cousin. It even adds a little bit of charm behind the wheel, though there are some remaining and new drawbacks that could doom the little hatch. And for 2024, this is now a hatchback only, which makes sense given the declining popularity of the model as a whole, though other decisions that Subaru made are much more confusing. So for 2024, they got rid of the most popular trim and then added another racy model. As you would expect, the entry-level model is more expensive than it was last year.
Yet, despite a $3,000 increase over last year's 5-speed manual sedan, the base Impreza remains America's cheapest all-wheel drive car.
And while the sport trim, which I have next to me, hasn't seen a big price increase, it did actually lose a few features. For the money, we still have some nice amenities here, like LED projector headlamps that are steering responsive on all grades. Step up to the sport, you'll have LED fog lights and a proximity key. Plus, it really pumps up the aesthetics of the Impreza. As the base model, you'll find unpainted mirror caps, 16-inch steel wheels with hubcaps, though you can upgrade those. The RS and Sport are just an aero kit short of looking like a WRX, or at least what the WRX should have looked like. I really don't understand why they made that into the Crosstrek sedan. I really enjoy the traditional hatchback proportions of this thing, along with the crisp lines, especially around back. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. On the inside, the Impreza hatchback feels very similar to its Trenbolone-addicted sibling. There's more sharp lines and more storage than what we had with the previous Impreza, though it retains that sort of cheap feeling.
Likewise, the elbow rest points are rubbery, and there's no soft touch for your knees.
It does seem like fit and finish has improved a little bit, and I like that they don't use a bunch of glossy black materials. It seems like it should age pretty well. It's easy to clean, though I do hope that Subaru strays away from using just dark black plastics everywhere.
Briefly, I'd like to thank Roy on the Eastside and their service department for letting me test drive this loaner Impreza for today's video. Their staff is knowledgeable, they never go over sticker, and they're dedicated to the community here in Bloomington, Indiana. Check them out.
While the sport trim gets red stitched seats, the RS furthers the zest. Unless you're spending like $31,000, there's still no lumbar adjustment, but the cushions themselves have great back support. Thigh support could be a little bit more prevalent, but still, I think a lot of people should find these agreeable. Now, where the Impreza takes a little step backward is in features, so we actually lose the leather-wrapped wheel and shifter that the Sport used to have, and it really does make this thing feel more cheap. You also now have to opt for heated seats on the Sport, further increasing the price.
It's nice to see standard dual-zone automatic climate control. Like some of the competition, you won't find a heated steering wheel, but leather or leather imposter seating is unavailable too.
The speaker systems are also mid at best. You do have a Harman Kardon sound system. It comes with 10 speakers, should have enough punch for most folks buying an Impreza, though there's no subwoofer. The 6-speaker sound system is just adequate, and if you go with the bass, it actually forgoes tweeters, which is really frustrating at $24,000. It really lacks treble. Now, the base model will have a dual 7-inch infotainment system that looks incredibly cheap, but still offers similar performance to what we have here with the 11.6-inch screen. The response time is certainly behind the class average. The resolution is just okay. It doesn't get overly bright, and it embeds the HVAC controls, which just adds extra steps, though I am happy that they at least leave your volume, tune dials, buttons for the defrosters, and temperature control. That way you have some quick adjustment for things that you use quite a bit.
I'm also thankful that the interface is simply laid out and that the wireless Android Auto Apple CarPlay is standard on the big screen now.
One thing that they didn't update was the super easy to read analog gauge cluster. They also added a USB-C port and a nice large cubby down here that you can actually accessorize a wireless charger into if you want. You also have door cards with a couple cubbies and a healthy amount of storage here in the center. Sitting behind myself in a comfortable yet not excessive position, I have just enough room for my knees. The floor is fairly low to the ground, so I have good support, and my head has like an inch to spare. This makes it one of the more usable in the class.
And the bland yet durable materials also make a lot of sense back here too.
The unfortunate part is that there's no rear USB ports unless you go for the RS, and none of them will have rear console vents. A center armrest will come with the Sport. And while it didn't actually improve over the previous model, the cargo area is better than most of its competitors. It's fairly tall, wide. If you fold down the seats, it's not perfectly flat, but it provides pretty good space for this footprint.
I also think the optional seat back protector is helpful, but unfortunately, US Imprezas dropped the spare tire for a fix-a-flat kit.
The new Impreza aims to be more lively, and in some important ways, it succeeds in achieving that. But at the same time, in true Subaru fashion, there's some head-scratching errors. So we have the same 2-liter naturally aspirated Boxer 4 that's been under the hood of this nameplate for quite some time. It makes 152 horsepower and 145 pound-feet of torque. In the past, if you wanted more from the Impreza, you were forced to go up to the WRX. Thankfully, for 2024, they offer the 2.5 RS, which gives you a 2.5 liter that makes 30 more horsepower. In the Crosstrek, that makes a huge difference in flat-out performance, but when you're just putting around town, the 2-liter is more than fine. You're really only gonna want more from it when you're trying to get up to highway speed or you're going up hills. It gets the job done, but it feels stressed out in the process. Now let's quantify this jaw-dropping feeling of acceleration. Pushing this thing off the line, there's not a whole lot of grunt, and then when it finally gets into its ideal power band, there's also not a lot of grunt. The 2.5 liter is going to give you a very similar power delivery, but I would expect that to get your 0 to 60 below 8 seconds, giving you plenty of passing power for this type of car. Still, that doesn't really equate to a fun experience, or at least it hasn't in any of the other models I've driven with the 2.5. To make the most use of its low output, Subaru pairs this up with a continuously variable transmission. They have dropped the 5-speed manual. And yeah, admittedly, it was kind of a clunky transmission, but it felt so old school and it gave the powertrain a little bit of soul, because without that there, this is a very appliance-like experience. Yes, it'll occasionally fake shift, and the Sport and RS models do get an 8-speed paddle shifter mode. It's only going to do so much. At least the CVT does do a good job of pulling off smooth, low-speed acceleration. And it also never lugs the engine, even going up long hills. It just switches to what ratio it needs, and the whole car just hums about. The powertrain could put you to sleep, but the all-wheel drive system is always awake. It's a full-time system. It can deliver well more than 50% of torque to either axle, and typically resides around a 60-40 split front-rear. And for 2024, Subaru says it's increased the reaction time.
That's never been a problem for me, but I'm not one to critique continuous innovation.
The engine doesn't seem like it's begging for mercy as you bring it up to highway speeds, which I suppose is a compliment. Once you're there, putting it into its intelligent mode will drop the revs a little bit. There is some wind noise, but road noise is under control. For a $25,000 car, it's quiet, and more so than its predecessor, though you're not going to impress your passengers with this one. One thing I was surprised to see is that the gas mileage rating has actually gone down. It's about in line with what you get from a Crosstrek according to the EPA. Now, I'm sure if you drive it easy, you will beat the ratings, but the front-wheel drive competition will blow this thing out of the water. The brakes here are strong. They use a new electronic booster, so you may need to get used to how quickly it bites, but they also help this feel like a more sharp car around back roads. Now, the old car was very capable, it was confident. This new one still is forgiving, but it has more lively handling, and it retains a super quick steering ratio like before, but now the steering doesn't have this vagueness on center. There's just a little bit of feedback pumped into the wheel too, which we could probably thank all of this to its new dual pinion steering rack, which basically takes the assist motor and moves it over to the side so it's not in between the column and the rack. To make that simple, there's less in between your hands and the road. Don't expect this to feel like a proper sport compact. It's still underweighted, and it doesn't really build up a whole lot as you're throwing it through corners. I just think it's very appropriate for just a regular small hatchback. Going through corners like I just did, with brakes in the pavement, it is highly confident. You know, I may even throw it into the manual mode. This thing reacts fairly quickly to your inputs. Body roll is present, though it's firm enough that as long as I'm not at excessive speeds, there's no secondary motions. This thing just does what you ask it to do. And with that steering, you know, okay, I'm not bored back here, something that I couldn't say about the previous Impreza. I think even with more power in the RS, it would be a bit of a joke to compare it to something like a Civic Si. It's really just the powertrain that lets this thing down, and again, the lack of a manual transmission. I really wish that Subaru would have adapted some sort of 6-speed manual, maybe from the WRX, into this kind of configuration, or at least for the 2.5 RS. Now, where the previous Impreza impressed us the most was on a horrible road. Now, unless you get the base model, you'll have what Subaru calls a sport-tuned suspension. It's supposed to be a little bit more firm. It's comfortable. It's smooth over the small and medium-sized imperfections. It takes the large ones on the chin with some cabin disruption, but I really can't complain. I also think it does a good job at least making me somewhat aware of what the road surface beneath me is like.
I'd have to drive it back to back with the Corolla, but this could be the most forgiving ride in the class.
One longtime strong suit of Subarus is the visibility. The beltline for a small hatchback is low, got a giant windshield. This is an extremely approachable car, especially with the more dialed-in steering.
It should also last a long time. After the first model year or two, the previous gen was highly dependable. The most consistent qualms seem to be interior quality, infotainment bugs, fragile windshields, and some reports of draining batteries. This new gen is based on the same platform with some chassis enhancements to help it handle better and reduce noise, vibration, and harshness. The powertrains are largely identical too, so I'm optimistic for the new Impreza and would recommend it if you highly prioritize reliability. Just remember, change the CVT fluid every 50,000 miles or so and do a fuel induction service every 30,000 to keep the intake valves clean.
While the IIHS has yet to crash test the Impreza, Subarus usually perform well in that front, and Subaru's latest Eastside Active Safety Suite is also competent. The driver assistance features, including lane centering, are more refined, though unfortunately you do have to spend quite a bit of money to get blind spot monitoring. Overall, this is a capable vehicle on a back road, on a rough road, and through any sort of weather elements, so long as you're also not trying to climb boulders. It does this while being a couple grand cheaper than the Subaru Crosstrek, and in its sport guise, it actually is a little fun to chuck around some corners. The interior is also fairly straightforward and practical.
I think this does have a strong appeal to those that want a hatchback with the rough road tolerance and most of the versatility of a crossover. The Impreza has a place in the market, but I'd argue that Subaru gave up on trying to expand its currently small hold. They killed the sedan, likely so they only had to make the body style shared with the Crosstrek. They axed the manual trans option, which would have actually made sense in the RS models. It also handles well, but that powertrain is soulless, and the interior, while improved, doesn't stand out from its competitors unless we're talking visibility. It's not dead in the water. I'd recommend this to anyone that needs comfort, all-wheel drive, a light price tag, and red stitching. However, I think Subaru played it too safe here. That type of move made sense with the new Crosstrek because it was the segment sales king. All they needed to do was fix some of the stuff people had beef with. The new Impreza receives the same big improvements, yet it's been on a sales slump. Removing configurations, reducing features on low specs, and ignoring the middling efficiency makes me think that Subaru is merely hoping the Impreza endures. If it doesn't, the towel is ready to be thrown. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please leave a like to help me school the maniacal YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more fun, detailed car content without fluff. Check out my Patreon for an additional podcast, and I'll catch you in the next one.